The rain drummed against the windows of Lincoln Community Center as Judge William Hartwell pulled into the parking lot. He sat in his black sedan for a moment, staring at the building through the windshield wipers. At 67, he had better things to do on a Thursday evening than babysit a bunch of teenagers practicing for some talent show. But here he was, because the city council had asked him to oversee the rehearsals for tomorrow's youth competition. They said they needed someone with authority to keep things organized. What they really meant was they needed someone scary enough to make the kids behave. William grabbed his briefcase and hurried through the rain to the entrance. Inside, the community center buzzed with activity. Teenagers scattered around the main hall, some singing, others practicing dance moves, and a few rehearsing dramatic monologues in corners. The noise hit him like a wall. He checked his expensive watch. 6:30 sharp. At least someone around here understood punctuality. William had built his entire career on being precise, fair, and completely uncompromising. For 40 years on the bench, lawyers feared his courtroom because they knew he tolerated no nonsense. The community center coordinator, a cheerful woman in her 50s, rushed over to greet him. "Judge Hartwell, thank you so much for volunteering your time. The kids are so excited to perform for you tomorrow." William nodded curtly. "I assume you have a schedule?" "Of course." She handed him a clipboard with neatly typed time slots. "Each participant gets 15 minutes to practice. We have 12 acts total, so we should be done by 9 o'clock. He scanned the list. Singers, dancers, a magic act, and several musicians. One name caught his eye. Piano, Rehearsal Room B. At least someone had the sense to practice away from this chaos. William had not always been this cold. 2 years ago, things were different. He would have enjoyed watching young people pursue their dreams. He might have even offered encouragement. But that was before Eleanor died, before his whole world crumbled in ways he never thought possible. Eleanor had been the warm one in their marriage. She loved community events, helped organize charity drives, and always saw the best in people. She would have loved this talent show. She probably would have volunteered to help, maybe even played piano accompaniment for some of the singers. But Eleanor was gone, and William had learned that caring too much only led to pain. It was easier to focus on rules, schedules, and maintaining order. Emotions were messy and unpredictable. Rules were clean and simple. He walked through the main hall, observing the organized chaos around him. A group of teenagers practiced a hip-hop routine near the stage, their sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. In another corner, a young man with a guitar strummed chords while quietly singing to himself. The coordinator had set up a small table for him, with a chair that gave him a view of the entire hall. William sat down and opened his briefcase, pulling out a legal pad to take notes. Organization was key to everything. As he watched the rehearsals, his mind wandered to his empty house waiting for him. The silence there had become deafening. Every room held memories of Eleanor, her books still on the nightstand, her coffee mug still in the kitchen cabinet, her piano still covered with a sheet in the living room. He had thrown himself into work after her funeral, taking on more cases, staying late at the courthouse, anything to avoid going home to that quiet house. His colleagues worried about him, but William assured them he was fine. He was always fine. Judges were supposed to be strong, impartial, above emotional weakness. The sound of piano music drifted from one of the side rooms, barely audible over the chatter and movement in the main hall. Someone was practicing scales, then moving into what sounded like a classical piece. The music was actually quite good, though William tried not to pay attention to it. Music had become too painful since Eleanor's death. She had been an accomplished pianist, playing for their church and sometimes performing at community events like this one. Their house used to be filled with music every evening after dinner. Now William could barely stand to hear a radio playing in restaurants. He forced himself to focus on his clipboard, making notes about the schedule and checking off acts as they finished their allotted practice time. This was just another obligation to fulfill, another duty to complete efficiently and professionally. But as the evening progressed, William found himself growing more irritated. Several acts had run over their 15-minute slots, throwing off the careful schedule. A dance group had taken 18 minutes. A singer had needed 20 minutes to work through her song multiple times. This was exactly the kind of disorganization that drove him crazy. Rules existed for a reason. If everyone just did whatever they wanted, chaos would follow. Someone needed to maintain order, even if it made him unpopular. The piano music from the side room continued, sometimes stopping and starting as the player worked through difficult passages. William found himself unconsciously listening, despite his efforts to ignore it. Whoever was playing had real talent, technical skill combined with genuine musical sensitivity. He shook his head and returned his attention to the clipboard. Sentiment had no place here. He had a job to do, and he would do it properly just like everything else in his carefully controlled life. Tomorrow's competition would run smoothly if he had anything to say about it. The rain continued to beat against the windows as Judge William Hartwell sat in his chair, watching the young performers and waiting for 9 o'clock to arrive so he could return to his silent house and his lonely evening routine. In the small rehearsal room down the hallway, 17-year-old Maya Chen sat at the old upright piano, completely lost in her music. Her fingers moved across the keys with the confidence that came from months of dedicated practice. Tomorrow's competition meant everything to her family's future. The piano was old and slightly out of tune, but Maya had learned to work with instruments that weren't perfect. Growing up in a family that struggled to make ends meet, she had practiced on library keyboards, borrowed instruments, and whatever piano she could find at school or community centers. Maya's parents worked double shifts at the local factory, and her younger brother needed new school supplies that they could barely afford. The $1,000 scholarship for tomorrow's winner would change everything. It could help pay for her senior year expenses and maybe even contribute to college applications. She had been preparing for this moment for 3 months, ever since she heard about the competition. Maya chose 3 pieces that showed different sides of her musical ability: a classical piece, a contemporary song, and something that bridged both worlds. But tonight, she found herself playing something different. Something that always calmed her nerves and helped her focus. It was a beautiful piece her elderly neighbor had taught her 2 years ago, before the sweet lady passed away from cancer. Maya remembered those afternoon lessons clearly. Mrs. Hartwell had been the kindest person she had ever met. Even while battling her illness, the older woman insisted on teaching Maya piano twice a week, refusing to accept any payment. "Music is meant to be shared, dear," Mrs. Hartwell would say in her gentle voice. "I'm not teaching you to make money. I'm teaching you because music makes the world a little brighter." Those lessons had been magical. Mrs. Hartwell's house smelled like lavender and fresh coffee, and classical music played softly in the background while they worked at the beautiful grand piano in the living room. Maya had never seen such an elegant instrument before. Mrs. Hartwell taught her more than just piano technique. She shared stories about famous composers, explained the emotions behind different pieces, and helped Maya understand that music was about feeling, not just hitting the right notes at the right time. Technical skill is important, Mrs. Hartwell would say, but heart is everything. Anyone can learn to play notes correctly. Only special people can make those notes come alive and touch someone's soul. Maya had treasured those lessons, especially because her own family, despite loving her dearly, didn't really understand her passion for music. They supported her because they saw how happy it made her, but they came from practical backgrounds where artistic pursuits seemed like luxuries they couldn't afford. Mrs. Hartwell understood, though. She encouraged Maya to dream big, to apply for music scholarships, to believe that her talent could take her places. When the cancer got worse and the lessons had to stop, Mrs. Hartwell made Maya promise to never give up on her music. "Promise me you'll keep playing," she had whispered during their last visit, when she was too weak to get out of bed. "Promise me you'll share this gift with the world. And promise me you'll never let anyone discourage you from following your dreams." Maya had kept that promise. Even when her high school music teacher suggested she focus on more practical subjects, even when her family worried about the cost of sheet music and instrument rental fees, even when other kids made fun of her for spending lunch breaks in the music room instead of hanging out in the cafeteria. Tonight, as she sat at this old community center piano, Maya could almost hear Mrs. Hartwell's encouraging voice. Tomorrow was her chance to honor that promise and maybe change her family's circumstances at the same time. She glanced at her phone. 8:15. She had been practicing for nearly half an hour, longer than the 15 minutes they were supposed to get. But the main hall was still noisy with other acts rehearsing, so she figured a few extra minutes wouldn't hurt anyone. Maya wanted to run through her competition pieces one more time, but first she needed to calm her nerves. So she played the piece Mrs. Hartwell had taught her, the one that always made her feel connected to something beautiful and peaceful. Her fingers found the familiar melody, and for a moment, the stress about tomorrow's competition faded away. This wasn't about winning or losing. This was about the pure joy of making music, about honoring the memory of someone who had believed in her when no one else did. The old piano's sound wasn't perfect, but Maya made it sing anyway. She thought about Mrs. Hartwell's words about making notes come alive, about touching someone's soul through music. Maya poured her heart into every phrase, every dynamic change, every subtle rubato that gave the music its emotional depth. She was so absorbed in the music that she didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway outside. She didn't notice when someone stopped outside the rehearsal room door. Maya was completely lost in the world that music created. The same world Mrs. Hartwell had first shown her 2 years ago. Tomorrow would bring competition and pressure and the weight of her family's financial hopes. But tonight, in this moment, there was only music and the memory of a kind woman who had changed her life forever. Judge Hartwell stood up from his chair in the main hall, checking his watch with growing irritation. 8:20. The piano player in rehearsal room B had been going for over 30 minutes now, completely ignoring the 15-minute limit that everyone else was expected to follow. This was exactly the kind of behavior that led to chaos. Give people an inch and they would take a mile. If he let this slide, every other participant would think they could ignore the rules too. Then the whole evening would fall apart, and tomorrow's competition would be a disaster. He had noticed the music earlier, drifting through the walls from the side room. It was admittedly quite good, but talent didn't excuse poor time management and disrespect for other people's needs. 3 other acts were still waiting for their practice slots, and this selfish teenager was preventing them from getting their fair share of preparation time. William walked down the hallway toward rehearsal room B, his dress shoes clicking authoritatively against the polished floor. He had dealt with plenty of entitled young people in his courtroom over the years. They all thought the rules didn't apply to them, that their special circumstances made them exempt from basic responsibility and consideration for others. The music grew louder as he approached the room. Through the small window in the door, he could see a teenage girl at the piano completely absorbed in her playing. She looked like she was in her own little world, totally oblivious to the fact that she was being inconsiderate to everyone else. William knocked sharply on the door, but the girl didn't seem to hear him over her playing. The music was some kind of classical piece, technically proficient but unnecessarily dramatic. These young performers always tried to show off instead of simply doing their job efficiently. He knocked again, harder this time, and finally pushed the door open. The girl continued playing, apparently so lost in her performance that she hadn't noticed his presence. This was even worse than he thought. Not only was she hogging practice time, but she was completely unaware of her surroundings. "Excuse me," William said loudly, his voice cutting through the music like a knife. The girl's hands jerked away from the keys as if she had been shocked. She spun around on the piano bench, her eyes wide with surprise and something that looked like fear. She was younger than he had expected, maybe 16 or 17, with long dark hair and worn-out shoes that suggested her family didn't have much money. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't hear you come in." "That much is obvious," William replied coldly. He stepped into the room, his tall frame filling the doorway. "Do you know what time it is?" The girl glanced at her phone and her face went pale. "Oh no, I'm so sorry. I lost track of time." Lost track of time. William repeated her words with the same tone he used in court when lawyers made excuses for being unprepared. "Young lady, you were allotted 15 minutes of practice time. That was 35 minutes ago. 3 other participants are waiting for their turn because you decided the rules don't apply to you." "I really didn't mean to," she started to explain, but William cut her off with a raised hand. "I don't want to hear excuses. I want to hear accountability. You signed up for a specific time slot just like everyone else. When that time is over, you pack up your music and make room for the next person. It's not complicated." The girl's face flushed red with embarrassment. Around her, William could see sheet music scattered on the piano bench and music stand. She had clearly been working hard, but that didn't excuse her thoughtlessness. "In the real world," William continued, his voice taking on the lecturing tone he used with young defendants, "there are consequences for not following rules. If you can't manage your practice time properly, how can anyone trust you to perform reliably tomorrow?" Other teenagers had started gathering in the hallway outside the rehearsal room. drawn by the sound of his raised voice. William didn't care. Maybe they would learn something from witnessing this conversation about personal responsibility. "I understand you're excited about tomorrow's competition," he said, "but excitement doesn't give you the right to be selfish. Those other students paid the same entry fee you did. They deserve their fair share of practice time." The girl nodded quickly, tears forming in her eyes. "You're absolutely right. I'm really sorry. I'll pack up right now." "Good. And next time, set a timer or ask someone to remind you when your time is up. Personal responsibility starts with basic time management." William watched as she hurriedly gathered her sheet music, her hands shaking slightly. Part of him felt a small twinge of sympathy. She seemed genuinely sorry, not defiant like many teenagers he encountered. But sympathy wouldn't help her learn important life lessons about respecting other people's time and following agreed-upon rules. "What's your name?" he asked as she closed her music folder. "Maya Chen," she replied quietly. "Well, Maya Chen, I hope you'll remember this conversation tomorrow when it's time for your actual performance. Judges notice when contestants show up unprepared because they didn't use their practice time wisely." Maya nodded again, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. "I will. Thank you for reminding me about the time." William was slightly surprised by her polite response. Most teenagers would have argued or made more excuses. Maybe this girl could actually learn from her mistake. "The next participant has been waiting for nearly 40 minutes, he said as she headed toward the door. "I suggest you apologize to them as well." "Of course," Maya said. She paused at the doorway and looked back at him. "Judge Hartwell, I really am sorry. I know you're trying to be fair to everyone." William nodded curtly. At least she understood the principle involved. Even if she had failed to follow it initially, maybe there was hope for her generation after all. Though he wasn't holding his breath. Maya walked toward the rehearsal room door, her music folder clutched tightly against her chest. Her face burned with embarrassment, and she could feel the eyes of other contestants watching from the hallway. Judge Hartwell was absolutely right. She had been selfish and inconsiderate. Tomorrow's performance would probably be a disaster now that she had made such a terrible first impression. But as she reached the doorway, something stopped her. Maybe it was the memory of Mrs. Hartwell's gentle voice, or maybe it was the promise she had made to never let anyone discourage her from sharing her music. Whatever it was, Maya found herself turning around. "Judge Hartwell," she said softly, "I know I messed up with the time and I promise it won't happen again. But could I please play just one more piece? It's very short and it's special to me." William's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "Are you serious? You just took up 40 minutes of practice time that belonged to other people and now you want even more?" "I know how it sounds," Maya said quickly, "but this piece isn't for tomorrow's competition. It's something my piano teacher taught me before she passed away. Playing it helps me remember her and calms my nerves. I promise it will only take 3 minutes." William stared at the girl in amazement. The audacity was breathtaking. She had just been lectured about following rules and respecting other people's time. And here she was asking for special treatment based on some sentimental story. "Absolutely not," he said firmly. "You've had your turn and you wasted it. The next contestant has been waiting long enough." Maya's shoulders sagged, but she nodded in acceptance. "I understand. You're right." She started to leave again, then stopped and looked back one more time. Mrs. Hartwell always said that music should be shared, especially when it comes from the heart. I think she would have wanted me to try. Something about the way she said it, the genuine sadness in her voice, made William pause. But before he could respond, Maya had already turned back to the piano. She sat down on the bench and placed her hands on the keys. "Young lady." "I said no," William began, but then the first notes rang out, and his words died in his throat. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, played with a tenderness that seemed to fill every corner of the small room. But it wasn't just the beauty of the music that stopped him cold. It was the melody itself. Those notes, that particular phrasing, the way her left hand moved through the familiar chord progression. William felt like he had been punched in the stomach. His legs suddenly felt weak and he grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't possible. The piece Maya was playing was Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy. The same piece his wife Eleanor had played almost every evening for 40 years of marriage. The same piece she had been practicing the day she got her cancer diagnosis. The same piece she had hummed softly during her final weeks in the hospital. But it wasn't just that Maya was playing Eleanor's favorite piece. It was how she was playing it. The subtle rubato, the delicate touch, the way she shaped each phrase, it was exactly like Eleanor's interpretation. Every nuance, every dynamic change, every moment of musical breathing was just the way his wife had played it. William's vision blurred as tears welled up in his eyes. For a moment, he was transported back to their living room, watching Eleanor at their baby grand piano while he read the newspaper in his favorite chair. He could almost smell her lavender perfume, almost hear her gentle humming as she played. The music continued, washing over him like a flood of memories he had tried so hard to suppress. Eleanor playing this piece on their wedding anniversary. Eleanor playing it when she was happy after a good day at work. Eleanor playing it when she was sad and needed comfort. Eleanor playing it the night before her first chemotherapy treatment. Her fingers trembling slightly, but her spirit still strong. Maya's hands moved across the keys with the same grace Eleanor had possessed. The same musical sensitivity that had made William fall in love with his wife's playing 47 years ago. Every note seemed to carry emotional weight. Every phrase told a story. Other contestants had gathered in the hallway, drawn by the beautiful music, but William barely noticed them. He was lost in a world of memory and grief and something else he couldn't quite identify. For the first time in 2 years, the wall he had built around his heart was beginning to crack. The piece was building toward its climactic section now, the melody soaring with a kind of desperate beauty that always reminded William of moonlight reflecting on water. This was the part where Eleanor would close her eyes and sway slightly, completely lost in the music's emotional landscape. William found himself holding his breath, just like he used to do when Eleanor played. The room seemed to shimmer with something magical, something that transcended the ordinary world of rules and schedules and careful emotional control. As the music began to wind down toward its gentle conclusion, William realized that his face was wet with tears. He hadn't cried since Eleanor's funeral, hadn't allowed himself to feel anything deeper than professional duty and lonely routine. But this girl, this talented teenager who had broken the rules and demanded special treatment, had somehow unlocked something in him that he thought was gone forever. The final notes hung in the air like a prayer, and then silence settled over the rehearsal room like a soft blanket. Maya's hands remained on the keys for a moment, her head bowed as if she too was emerging from some sacred space where music and memory lived together. The silence in the rehearsal room felt heavy and sacred. Maya slowly lifted her hands from the piano keys, taking a deep breath as she always did after playing that particular piece. Something about it always left her feeling peaceful, but also a little sad, like saying goodbye to an old friend. She turned around on the piano bench, expecting to see Judge Hartwell's angry face and prepare for another lecture about rule breaking. Instead, she saw something that shocked her completely. The stern judge was standing frozen in the doorway, his face pale and wet with tears. Maya had never seen an adult cry like that, especially not someone as intimidating as Judge Hartwell. His usually perfect composure was completely gone. He looked like he had seen a ghost or like someone had told him terrible news. His hands were shaking and he seemed to be struggling to breathe normally. Judge Hartwell, Maya said softly, suddenly worried that something was wrong with him. Are you okay? William couldn't answer. The flood of memories was too overwhelming. Eleanor at their old house playing this exact piece while he graded papers at the kitchen table. Eleanor playing it the night their daughter called to tell them she was pregnant with their first grandchild. Eleanor playing it during the long, dark months of cancer treatment, when music was one of the few things that still brought her joy. The girl's interpretation had been so perfect, so exactly like Eleanor's, that for a moment William had forgotten where he was. He had forgotten that Eleanor was gone, forgotten about the 2 years of emptiness and isolation he had endured since her death. Where did you learn that piece? He finally managed to whisper, his voice hoarse with emotion. Maya looked confused by his reaction. My piano teacher taught it to me. It was her favorite piece to play. She said it reminded her of peaceful nights and beautiful dreams. William's heart started racing. Your piano teacher. What was her name? Mrs. Hartwell, Maya said, and William felt the world tilt sideways. She was the sweetest lady. She lived in the big house on Maple Street with the beautiful garden. She taught me piano for almost 2 years before she got sick. The words hit William like physical blows. Maple Street. That was their street, their house, Their garden that Eleanor had spent decades nurturing with the same love and patience she brought to everything in her life. "Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Maya's face lit up with a sad smile. "Yes, did you know her? She was amazing. She never let me pay for lessons even though my family offered. She said music was meant to be shared freely, like sunshine or fresh air." William had to sit down. His legs simply wouldn't support him anymore. He sank into the chair by the door, staring at this girl who had somehow been connected to his wife during Eleanor's final years. Years when he had been too busy with court cases and legal briefs to spend enough time at home. She talked about her husband sometimes, Maya continued, not yet understanding the full significance of what she was revealing. She said he was a judge, and that he worked very hard to help people. She was so proud of him, but she worried that he was too serious all the time. She wished he would smile more and remember to enjoy the simple things in life. Each word was like a knife in William's chest. Eleanor had been proud of him. She had worried about his seriousness. During those final years when he thought he was providing for their future by working endless hours, Eleanor had been sharing her deepest thoughts with this young girl he had just lectured about responsibility. She used to say that music could heal broken hearts, Maya went on, her voice growing softer as she remembered. She told me that when people are hurting, sometimes a beautiful melody can reach them when nothing else can. She said that's why it was so important for me to keep playing no matter what. William closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the realization of how much he had missed. While he was building his reputation as the county's toughest judge, Eleanor was building relationships with people like Maya. While he was focused on rules and justice and maintaining order, Eleanor was sharing her music and her wisdom with anyone who needed it. "The last time I saw her," Maya said, tears now forming in her own eyes, "she was very weak, but she made me promise to never stop playing, and to never let anyone discourage me from sharing my music with the world. She said someday my playing might help someone the way her playing had always helped her." William opened his eyes and really looked at Maya for the first time. This wasn't just some rule-breaking teenager who needed discipline. This was someone who had been touched by Eleanor's kindness, someone who carried forward his wife's legacy of using music to bring beauty into the world. She also said, Maya continued, wiping her eyes, that she hoped her husband would remember how to be happy again someday. She said he used to love music, but that sadness had made him forget about the things that really mattered. The truth hit William like a thunderbolt. Eleanor had known. She had known that her death would leave him lost and angry, and unable to connect with the world around him. She had known that he would bury himself in work and rules and emotional isolation, and somehow she had been preparing for this moment. Maya was still talking, sharing memories of afternoon lessons and conversations about life and music. But William was thinking about all the evenings he had come home late to find Eleanor at the piano, playing Clair de Lune while she waited for him. He had always assumed she was just practicing or entertaining herself. Now he realized she had been calling to him, trying to remind him of the beauty and tenderness that existed beyond the harsh realities of his professional world. She had been offering him the same gift she gave to Maya, the healing power of music shared with love. William sat in stunned silence, trying to process what Maya had just revealed. This girl, this teenager he had just scolded for breaking rules, had been learning from Eleanor during the most difficult period of their marriage. While he was consumed with work and avoiding the reality of his wife's illness, Eleanor had been pouring her heart into teaching this young musician. Maya, he said quietly, his voice still shaky with emotion. Mrs. Hartwell. Eleanor, she was my wife. Maya's eyes widened in shock. The sheet music in her hands fluttered to the floor as she stared at him. Your wife, but you're Judge Hartwell. She talked about you all the time. What did she say? William asked, though he wasn't sure he was ready to hear the answer. Maya looked confused and a little frightened, as if she had stumbled into something much bigger than she understood. She said you were the kindest man she had ever known, but that grief was making you forget who you really were. William felt his chest tighten. Grief? But she was the one who was sick. She meant grief about other things, Maya explained gently. She said you had seen too much sadness in your work, too many broken families and people making terrible choices. She worried that judging other people's problems every day was making you forget how to see the good in the world. The words hit William like a revelation. Eleanor had understood something he hadn't even recognized in himself. Years of dealing with criminals and family disputes and bitter custody battles had indeed hardened his heart. Long before her cancer diagnosis, she used to say that you needed music in your life again, Maya continued. She told me you used to love listening to her play, but that you had stopped making time for beautiful things. She hoped that someday someone would remind you why art and music and kindness matter. William remembered now. In their early years of marriage, he would sit for hours listening to Eleanor practice. He would even request his favorite pieces, and she would play them with a smile that made his whole day brighter. When had he stopped doing that? When had he become too busy, too stressed, too focused on problems to appreciate the beauty Eleanor created every evening? During her last few months, Maya said softly, she talked about you more and more. She was worried about what would happen to you after she was gone. She said you might forget how to be happy without her there to remind you. William's throat felt tight. She was right. I haven't been happy. I haven't been much of anything except angry and lonely. Maya studied his face with the kind of wisdom that seemed too mature for her age. She said that sometimes when people are hurting really badly, they build walls around their hearts to protect themselves. But those same walls that keep out pain also keep out love and joy and music. Eleanor had said that. His brilliant, intuitive wife had understood exactly what would happen to him, and she had tried to prepare him for it. But he had been too stubborn, too afraid, too proud to listen. She made me promise something else, Maya said, her voice growing even quieter. She made me promise that if I ever met someone who had forgotten how to smile, I would play music for them. She said music has the power to break down walls that nothing else can touch. William stared at Maya with new understanding. You didn't know. When you insisted on playing that piece, you didn't know who I was. Maya shook her head. I had no idea. I just felt like I needed to play it. Something about tonight, about being here, about meeting you. It felt like Mrs. Hartwell was telling me to share her favorite piece with someone who needed to hear it. The coincidence was too perfect, too meaningful to ignore. Eleanor had taught this girl her most beloved piece of music. She had filled Maya's heart with stories about kindness and healing, and the importance of sharing beauty with the world. And now, 2 years after Eleanor's death, Maya had walked into William's life at exactly the moment when he needed to remember who he used to be. She was preparing you, William realized aloud. Eleanor was preparing you for this meeting. Maya tilted her head, considering this possibility. Maybe. She always said that music brings people together in mysterious ways. She said that sometimes a song can create connections between people who are meant to help each other. William thought about all the evenings he had come home to find Eleanor at the piano, playing Claire de Lune while she waited for him. Had she been hoping he would stop and listen? Had she been trying to call him back to the person he used to be? The man who valued beauty and tenderness alongside justice and responsibility? I failed her, he whispered more to himself than to Maya. I was so busy being important, being professional, being strong. I forgot how to just be her husband. Maya reached out and gently touched his arm. She didn't think you failed her. She said you were carrying too much weight, trying to fix the whole world's problems by yourself. She said she wished she could help you remember that you didn't have to be perfect all the time. William looked into Maya's young face and saw something of Eleanor's compassion reflected there. This girl had absorbed more than just piano technique from his wife. She had learned Eleanor's way of seeing past people's harsh exteriors to the hurting hearts underneath. What else did she teach you? He asked. Maya smiled sadly. She taught me that everyone is fighting battles we can't see. She said that's why it's so important to be kind, even to people who seem cold or mean. She said sometimes the crankiest people are just the ones who need love the most. William sat quietly for several minutes, absorbing everything Maya had shared about Eleanor. The rehearsal room felt different now, filled with a kind of sacred presence that came from two people, connecting over shared love for someone who was gone. Other contestants had given up, waiting and moved their practice sessions to different areas of the community center. The hallway outside was empty now, leaving William and Maya alone with their memories and the old piano that had somehow brought them together. Can I ask you something? Maya said hesitantly. Mrs. Hartwell showed me pictures of her husband once, but you look different than I expected. William managed a small, sad smile. Different how? Sadder, Maya said simply. In the pictures you were laughing. She had one of you two dancing at what looked like a wedding, and another of you reading a book while she played piano. You looked lighter somehow. Happier. William remembered those photos. The dancing picture was from their daughter's wedding 5 years ago. The reading picture was from a lazy Sunday morning when life felt simple and good. Eleanor had insisted on taking that second photo, saying she wanted to remember him looking peaceful and content. "I used to be happier," William admitted, "before I let work take over everything. Before I forgot what Eleanor was trying to tell me about slowing down and appreciating life." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "She said that you were the smartest person she knew, but that smart people sometimes think too much and feel too little. She said you were like a judge even at home, always analyzing and solving problems instead of just enjoying the moment." The observation stung because it was so accurate. William had spent decades making decisions, weighing evidence, determining right from wrong. Somewhere along the way, he had started treating his personal life like another case to manage rather than a gift to cherish. "Tomorrow is the competition," Maya said, changing the subject gently. "I should probably go home and get some rest." William suddenly realized how much he didn't want this conversation to end. For the first time in 2 years, he felt connected to another human being. More than that, he felt connected to Eleanor through this remarkable girl who carried forward his wife's wisdom and musical talent. "Maya, wait," he said as she started gathering her sheet music again. Would you mind playing that piece one more time? I need to hear it again." Maya looked surprised but pleased. "Of course. Mrs. Hartwell always said that beautiful music should be shared as often as possible." She sat back down at the piano and placed her hands on the keys. This time, William moved closer, pulling up a chair so he could watch her hands move across the keyboard. This time, he let himself fully experience the music instead of fighting against the emotions it brought up. As Maya played, William allowed himself to remember the good times with Eleanor. Their first apartment, where she practiced on a tiny electronic keyboard because they couldn't afford a real piano. The day they bought their first house and Eleanor spent hours choosing the perfect spot for the baby grand piano they bought to celebrate. The countless evenings when her music filled their home with beauty and peace. But he also remembered things he had forgotten, times when Eleanor had tried to include him in her musical world and he had been too busy or distracted to participate. Invitations to concerts that he had declined because of work. Evenings when she had played his favorite pieces and he had barely looked up from his legal briefs. "I missed so much," he whispered, as Maya reached the piece's gentle conclusion. "Maybe," Maya said, but Mrs. Hartwell didn't think it was too late. She said people can always choose to start appreciating beauty again, as long as they're still alive to hear music. William felt something shifting inside his chest. Like a door that had been locked for 2 years was finally creaking open. The constant anger and loneliness that had defined his life since Eleanor's death was still there, but it no longer felt permanent and overwhelming. "She really believed that?" he asked. Maya nodded enthusiastically. "She said that's why she kept teaching me, even when she was getting sicker. She said every person who learns to make beautiful music creates more beauty in the world. She said beauty fights against all the ugliness and sadness one song at a time." William thought about his courtroom, where he spent his days dealing with the worst aspects of human nature. Divorce proceedings filled with bitter hatred, criminal cases involving violence and betrayal, child custody battles where parents used their children as weapons against each other. Eleanor had known how much that darkness affected him, and she had tried to balance it with music and beauty and reminders that goodness still existed in the world, but he had been too stubborn to accept her help, too convinced that staying hard and cynical was the only way to survive his demanding career. "Your wife was special," Maya said softly. "She changed my life. She made me believe that my music mattered, that I could actually make a difference in the world by sharing what I loved to do." William looked at this remarkable teenager who had somehow inherited Eleanor's gift for touching people's hearts through music. "She was right about you. Your music does matter tonight. Tonight you reminded me of things I thought I had lost forever." Maya smiled, and for a moment William could see Eleanor in her expression. The same warmth, the same hope, the same belief that people were fundamentally good and deserving of kindness. "Mrs. Hartwell used to say that music creates bridges between people," Maya said. "She said that when two people share a beautiful song, they become connected in a way that nothing can break." William understood now why Eleanor had spent so much time with Maya. She had seen in this girl a kindred spirit, someone who understood that music was about more than entertainment or technical skill. Maya had absorbed Eleanor's philosophy about using art to heal and connect and inspire. The next evening, Lincoln Community Center buzzed with excitement as families gathered for the annual youth talent competition. The main hall had been transformed with colorful banners and professional lighting, and rows of folding chairs filled the space where teenagers had been practicing just 24 hours earlier. Judge William Hartwell sat in the front row, but he was a different man than the one who had arrived the night before. He had spent most of the previous evening talking with Maya about Eleanor, sharing memories and learning about the profound impact his wife had made on this remarkable young woman's life. For the first time in 2 years, William had slept peacefully. Instead of the usual nightmares about loss and regret, he had dreamed about Eleanor playing piano while he sat nearby, content and grateful for the beauty she brought into their home. Maya was the 7th performer of the evening, which gave William time to observe the other contestants with new eyes. Instead of seeing potential rule breakers who needed discipline, he saw young people courageously sharing their talents with the world. A shy boy who overcame his stutter when he sang, twin sisters whose synchronized dance routine showed months of dedicated practice, a young man whose magic tricks brought wonder and laughter to an audience of proud parents. Each act reminded William of what Eleanor had always tried to tell him, that there was more to life than problems to be solved and rules to be enforced. There was creativity and hope and the beautiful risk that came with putting yourself in front of others and saying, "This is what I love. This is who I am." When Maya's name was called, William felt his heart rate quicken. She walked onto the stage wearing a simple black dress that her mother had probably ironed specially for this evening. Her long dark hair was pulled back neatly, and she carried herself with quiet confidence, despite what must have been overwhelming nerves. Maya sat down at the borrowed grand piano that had been moved onto the stage for the musical acts. She adjusted the bench, placed her hands on the keys, and took a deep breath. From his seat in the front row, William could see her close her eyes for just a moment, as if she was centering herself or perhaps saying a silent prayer. Then she began to play. Her first piece was a contemporary arrangement of a popular song, showcasing her ability to bridge classical technique with modern musical styles. Her touch was confident and expressive, her interpretation mature beyond her 17 years. The audience listened with obvious appreciation, and William found himself genuinely impressed by her skill. But it was her second piece that took William's breath away. Maya announced that she would be playing Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy, and that she was dedicating the performance to her beloved piano teacher, who had passed away 2 years earlier. As the familiar opening notes filled the hall, William felt tears forming in his eyes again. But this time they weren't tears of pure grief. They were tears of gratitude and wonder and something that felt almost like joy. Maya's performance was absolutely beautiful. Every phrase was shaped with care. Every dynamic change served the music's emotional narrative. She played with the same sensitivity William remembered from Eleanor's interpretations, but Maya brought her own unique voice to the piece as well. The audience was completely captivated. Parents stopped whispering to each other. Young children sat still in their seats, and even the other contestants watched from the wings with obvious admiration. The music seemed to cast a spell over the entire room, creating the kind of shared emotional experience that Eleanor had always said was music's greatest gift. As Maya approached the piece's climactic section, William found himself leaning forward in his chair. He was no longer just listening to a talented teenager perform in a community talent show. He was witnessing something transcendent, something that connected him to Eleanor and to the beauty that existed beyond his daily struggles with human weakness and failure. When the final notes faded into silence, the audience erupted in spontaneous applause. People jumped to their feet, and William realized he was among them. Maya stood and curtsied gracefully, her face glowing with the satisfaction of a performance that had truly touched people's hearts. But as she looked out into the audience, her eyes found William's, and they shared a moment of understanding that went beyond words. In that moment, William knew that Eleanor was somehow present, that her legacy of love and music and healing was alive in this remarkable young woman. The competition continued with several more acts, but William already knew who deserved to win. When the judges announced Maya as the first-place winner, he was the first person on his feet, applauding louder than anyone else in the room. After the ceremony, as families gathered around their young performers with congratulations and flowers, William approached Maya and her parents. He introduced himself properly this time, not as the stern judge who enforced rules, but as Eleanor's widowed husband who had been blessed to discover his wife's legacy of kindness. In the weeks that followed, William's life began to change in ways he never could have imagined. He started volunteering at the community center, helping coordinate music programs for young people. He began attending local concerts again, rediscovering his love for live music that Eleanor had tried so hard to nurture. Most importantly, he started visiting Eleanor's grave regularly, bringing fresh flowers and sharing stories about Maya and the other young musicians he was meeting. He would sit by her headstone and talk about the beautiful concert Maya had given, about the way music was bringing light back into his life, about how sorry he was for forgetting her lessons about kindness and beauty. Maya continued her musical education with the scholarship money, but she also continued her friendship with William. Sometimes she would visit him at home, playing Eleanor's baby grand piano that had sat silent under its cover for 2 years. The house filled with music again, and with it came laughter and conversation and the warmth of human connection. William never forgot the evening when a rule-breaking teenager had accidentally reminded him how to feel again. Eleanor's greatest gift hadn't been her own musical talent. It had been her ability to plant seeds of beauty and compassion in other people's hearts, seeds that would bloom when they were needed most.